The shadow is running your life until you face it. Most people believe they know who they are. They can list their strengths. They can explain their weaknesses. They can tell you their goals, their fears, their preferences. But that's not self-knowledge. That's self-description. Self-knowledge is knowing the parts of you that you don't want to admit exist. And that's where this gets uncomfortable. There are parts of you that are shaping your decisions that you never consciously met. Parts that sabotage progress. Parts that resist visibility. Parts that choose comfort while you tell yourself you want growth. And you don't experience these parts as me. You experience them as bad luck, low motivation, burnout, timing, other people. But they are not external, they're internal. Carl Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Let that sit. Most people think fate is something that happens to them. But what if it's just repetition from parts of you refuse to see? You say you want success, but a part of you fears exposure. You say you want discipline, but a part of you resents structure. You say you want growth, but a part of you is loyal to who you've always been. And that hidden part has a name. Jung called it the shadow. The shadow is not evil. It's not dramatic. It's not some dark alter ego. It's simply the parts of you that didn't get approval. It's the traits you suppressed, the impulses you judged, the emotions you were told were too much, the weaknesses you hid to stay accepted. They didn't disappear. They went underground. And anything underground doesn't die. It waits. This is why you can read every book, watch every video, build every plan, and still sabotage yourself. Because you're trying to discipline the conscious mind while the unconscious is pulling all the strings. You don't lose momentum randomly. You don't procrastinate randomly. You don't fall off randomly. There's a part of you benefiting from staying exactly where you are. That sentence makes people defensive. Good. It should. Because if you're benefiting from your stagnation, then your stagnation isn't an accident. is protection. Protection from judgment, protection from failure, it's protection from outgrowing your environment. It's protection from becoming visible enough to be criticized. The shadow protects your identity, even if that identity is small. And here's the brutal truth. The more you deny it, the more power it has. And this is not about becoming positive. This one here in particular is not about affirmations. This is not about pushing harder. This is about meeting the parts of you that you pretend aren't there. Because the part of you that says, I just need more discipline, might not be the part actually running your life. And until you face what's operating underneath your goals, you'll keep calling repetition bad luck. You'll keep calling sabotage burnout. You'll keep calling fear logic. So today we go underneath. No hype, no surface level advice. We're going to talk about why you criticize certain people, why specific traits trigger you, why you self-sabotage right after progress, why success feels unsafe, and why integration, not elimination, is the real power move. Because you cannot outwork what you refuse to see. And if you're serious about reprogramming your mind, not just motivating yourself, this is where it starts. The illusion of self-awareness. Why knowing about yourself is not the same as knowing yourself. Most people believe they are self-aware. They say things like, I know I procrastinate. I know I overthink. I know I have trust issues. I know I get distracted. That's not deep awareness. That's a labeling behavior. True self-awareness is not knowing what you do. It's knowing why you do it and what part of you benefits from it. There's a version of you that speaks publicly, and there's a version of you that operates privately. The public one sets goals. The private one protects identity. And most people only know the public one. They know the version that performs, the version that explains, the version that justifies. They don't know the version that reacts automatically. Let's make this uncomfortable. You are not fully in control of your behavior. It's not because you're weak, but because much of your behavior is automated. It was automated long before conscious thought enters. You think, I decided to scroll. I decided to quit. I decided not to try. But most decisions are reactions. They're triggers. They're associations. They're conditioned responses. And the ego hates hearing this. Because the ego wants to believe I'm rational. I'm logical. I choose. You see, Jung believed the ego is only a fragment of the psyche, a surface layer, useful but limited. The problem isn't that the ego exists. The problem is when the ego thinks it's the whole story. You can explain your habits without understanding their origin. You can describe your patterns without confronting what feeds them. You can say I sabotage myself without asking, what part of me feels safer when I do? That question is where real awareness begins. All right, let's slow this down. Every pattern has a psychological payoff, even the destructive ones. Procrastination might protect you from evaluation. Perfectionism might protect you from criticism. Staying small might protect you from visibility. Self-doubt might protect you from risk. When you call yourself lazy, you avoid asking what laziness protects. When you call yourself inconsistent, you avoid asking what consistency threatens. Surface awareness blames behavior. Deep awareness questions identity. And this is where people stop. Because once you ask, what part of me benefits from this pattern, you can't stay comfortable. You start noticing you get close to progress, then slow down. You gain momentum, then create distractions. You build structure, then resent it. That's not randomness. It's inner conflict. And inner conflict always wins against surface motivation. You see, most people live with fragmented identities. One part wants growth. Another part wants safety. One part wants visibility. Another part wants invisibility. One part wants discipline. Another part resents control. And when you don't acknowledge the internal split, you misinterpret it as weakness. But it's not weakness. It's unexamined multiplicity. You are not one voice. You are a system of voices. And some of them have been silent for years. When a part of you feels ignored, it doesn't disappear. It interferes. This is why forcing discipline without psychological integration creates burnout. Because you're trying to dominate yourself instead of understanding yourself. Self-awareness is not saying, I know I have flaws. It's saying, I know where those flaws were born. And until you trace the origin, you will keep managing symptoms, not changing structure. Most people want to reprogram behavior. Very few are willing to examine identity. But identity drives behavior, not the other way around. And this leads directly into the next layer. Because once you understand that you are not a single unified voice, you have to ask, what are the parts of me I've rejected? What traits did I bury? What emotions did I suppress to be accepted? That's where the shadow enters fully. What the shadow actually is, without the mysticism. Most people hear the word shadow. They imagine something dark, sinister, almost supernatural. That's not what Jung meant. The shadow is not evil. It's rejected. The shadow is the collection of traits, impulses, emotions, and desires that you learned were unacceptable. Not objectively unacceptable, socially unacceptable, familially unacceptable, culturally unacceptable. And when you're young, acceptance equals survival. So you adapt. If anger got punished, you suppressed anger. If confidence got labeled as arrogance, you shrank. If vulnerability got marked, you hardened. If ambition threatened others, you tone it down. Over time, you construct a persona, a socially accepted version of yourself. And everything that doesn't fit that persona gets pushed into the shadow. This isn't conscious. You don't wake up at 7 years old and say, I will now disown parts of myself. It happens automatically. You feel rejection, so you adjust. You feel approval, you repeat. And slowly, a split forms. The version of you that is allowed and the version of you that is hidden. The allowed version becomes your identity. The hidden version becomes your shadow. Now here's where this gets powerful. The shadow doesn't disappear. It stores energy. Every suppressed emotion, every denied impulse, every unexpressed trait. Energy. And energy doesn't dissolve just because it's inconvenience. It looks for expression. Sometimes it leaks out in small ways. Sarcasm, passive aggression, overreactions, resentment. Sometimes it erupts. Self-sabotage, explosive anger, sudden withdrawal, impulsive decisions. You think, that's not me, but it is you. It's just a part of you you never integrated. Let's make this even clearer. If you were raised to be the responsible one, you may have buried your impulsive side. If you were raised to be the strong one, you may have buried your need for help. If you were raised to be the quiet one, you may have buried your dominance. If you were praised for being agreeable, you may have buried your boundaries. And the longer you suppress those traits, the more distorted they become. Because what's suppressed doesn't get refined. It stays raw. That's why when it finally surfaces, it feels extreme. It doesn't feel balanced. It feels explosive. Here's the ruthless truth. The traits you judge most harshly in others, they're often traits you rejected in yourself. The arrogance that triggers you. The laziness that irritates you. The selfishness that angers you. The insecurities that disgust you. Why does it trigger you so strongly? It's because the nervous system recognizes it. Protection is not mystical. It's psychological defense. It's easier to condemn a trait externally than it is to admit it internally. Jung didn't say the shadow was optional. He said it was inevitable. Everyone has one. The difference is awareness. When you deny your shadow, it controls you unconsciously. When you acknowledge it, it becomes integrated. And integration is power. Because once you admit, I am capable of laziness, you stop being secretly controlled by it. Once you admit, I am capable of ego, you can manage it instead of denying it. Once you admit, I am capable of fear, you stop pretending courage is your only identity. The shadow is not the enemy. Unawareness is. Most people try to build confidence by rejecting weakness. But rejecting weakness makes it stronger. Real power comes from saying, yes, that exists in me. Now I choose how it's expressed. You don't eliminate the shadow. You civilize it. You integrate it. You refine it. Because here's what nobody tells you. Your ambition might live in your shadow. Your aggression might live there. Your assertiveness might live there. Your hunger might live there. If you were taught to be small, your greatness is probably buried. And that's why discipline alone doesn't work. Because sometimes the part sabotaging you is protecting the identity you were rewarded for. This leads to the next layer. Because once you understand what the shadow is, you have to confront it, how it actually shows up. And it doesn't show up as darkness. It shows up as self-sabotage. Right when progress begins. Why you sabotage yourself right after progress? The shadow protects the identity you were rewarded for. Pay attention to the pattern. You start gaining momentum. You wake up earlier. You're consistent for a week. You execute your plan. You feel sharper, more aligned, more focused. And then something shifts. You miss a day. Then you miss another. You create a reasonable excuse. You tell yourself you will reset Monday. And before you realize it, you're back in a familiar version of yourself. Most people call that a lack of discipline. It's not. It's identity protection. The shadow doesn't only hold weakness, it holds loyalty. And loyalty to the version of you that keeps you accepted. Loyalty to the role you played in your family. Loyalty to the expectations people place on you. Loyalty to the level you've always operated at. Growth threatens that loyalty. If you become more disciplined than your environment, you separate from it. If you earn more than your peers, you change the dynamic. If you become more confident, you disrupt old roles. And disruption feels dangerous to the nervous system. So right when you begin expanding, a small part of you pulls back. Not because it hates success, because it fears disconnection. Let's go deeper. If you were praised for being easygoing, discipline feels like intensity. If you were praised for being humble, ambition feels like arrogance. If you were praised for being available. Boundaries feel selfish. So when you move toward growth, the shadow whispers, "This isn't who you are." And you listen, not consciously, but behavior shifts. You delay, you distract yourself, you question your plan, you soften your standards, you look for proof that this new version won't last. Because the old identity feels safer. It's familiar. It's socially validated. It kept you connected. This is why sabotage often happens right after visible progress. Not at the beginning, at the point of expansion. Because expansion increases exposure. Exposure increases vulnerability. And vulnerability activates the shadow. You don't just fear failure. You fear success that separates you. Let that sit. Most people believe they're afraid of not making it. But psychologically, many are more afraid of what happens if they do. If you succeed, you can't blame your circumstances anymore. If you succeed, you can't play small anymore. You can't hide behind potential anymore. You become visible, accountable, exposed. And the shadow hates exposure. Because the shadow was built to hide. So it sabotages subtly. It doesn't destroy your life. It just lowers your ceiling. You stay capable, but inconsistent. Talented, but unreliable. Motivated, but unstable. That way you never fully separate from your old identity. This is why systems alone sometimes fail. You can build structure. You can remove a little friction. You can schedule your day. But if the identity underneath isn't integrated, you'll unconsciously resist the system. You'll resent it. You'll forget it. You'll test it. You'll bend it. Because the shadow doesn't want elimination. It wants acknowledgement. This is the shift. Instead of asking, why am I so inconsistent? Ask what part of me feels threatened by consistency. Instead of asking, why do I sabotage success? Ask what version of me feels unsafe being seen. Those questions change everything. Because once you identify the part that resists, you stop fighting blindly. You stop saying, I need more discipline. You start saying, I need integration. Integration means you acknowledge the fear of separation. It means you acknowledge the loyalty to your old role. It means you acknowledge the comfort of being underestimated. And once acknowledged, the energy stops operating underground. You can't eliminate your shadow, but you can bring it into the room. And once it's in the room, it stops pulling the strings. This leads to something even heavier, because the shadow doesn't only show up in self-sabotage. It shows up in how you judge others. And that's where projection becomes impossible to ignore. Projection. The traits you attack are often your own. Projection is one of the most powerful psychological defenses you have, and one of the least recognized. Projection is when you see in others what you refuse to see in yourself. Not metaphorically, literally. The human mind would rather relocate discomfort than confront it. So instead of admitting, I struggle with insecurity, you say, they're insecure. Instead of admitting, I crave validation, you say they just want attention. Instead of admitting, I'm capable of arrogance, you say they're just full of themselves. Projection protects the ego, but it blinds you. Let's make this real. Think about the type of person that irritates you most. Not slightly annoys you, irritates you, triggers you, makes you react emotionally. Why? Most people say because they're lazy, because they're arrogant, because they're weak, because they're fake. Now here's the uncomfortable question. What if that trait exists in you, but in a form you don't allow? Jung believed the shadow often reveals itself through projection. The intensity of your reaction is the clue. If someone's confidence enrages you, you should ask yourself, where have I suppressed my own assertiveness? If someone's ambition makes you uncomfortable, ask, where have I convinced myself to play small? If someone's laziness disgusts you, ask, where do I avoid effort when no one is watching? Projection isn't about accusing yourself. It's about reclaiming disowned energy. Because here's the hidden layer. The traits you condemn often contain potential. Aggression, integrated, becomes drive. arrogance refined becomes confidence. Selfishness balanced becomes boundaries. Impulsiveness directed becomes creativity. But if you only see those traits as bad, you bury your own access to them. So instead of integrating power, you criticize it. Instead of refining ambition, you judge it. Instead of developing boundaries, you label them as rude. Projection keeps you morally comfortable, but psychologically weak. Because anything you disown controls you from the outside. Okay, let's go deeper. Projection doesn't only show up as judgment, it shows up as envy. If you envy someone's lifestyle, visibility, confidence, discipline, envy is often a sign of unrealized potential, not admiration, recognition. You recognize something in them that exists in you, but hasn't been developed. So instead of asking, how do I build that? The ego asks, how do I minimize them? That's the shadow defending identity. And this is where growth requires maturity. Because once you understand projection, you lose the luxury of blind criticism. You can't just say, I hate that trait. You have to ask, what does this reaction say about me? That question destabilizes the ego and strengthens awareness. Projection also explains something else. Why you keep attracting similar situations. If you consistently encounter the same type of person, the same dynamic, the same conflict, it may not be coincidence. It may be unintegrated material seeking recognition. You can only outrun your shadow for so long. Eventually, it appears externally. And this is why people feel like life keeps testing them. It's not fate. It's repetition. Until you integrate the trait, you will encounter it. The people who trigger you most are often mirrors, not exact reflections, distorted ones. And here's the shift. Instead of reacting outward, start investigating inward. Not to shame yourself, to reclaim yourself. Because the energy you project outward is energy you don't consciously own. And unowned energy cannot be directed. Once you own it, you can shape it. Once you shape it, it becomes strength. This is not about becoming passive. It's about becoming aware. And awareness collapses blind reaction. Now we move to the final layer. Because understanding the shadow is not enough. You don't win by exposing it. You win by integrating it. Integration also changes how you build discipline. Before integration, discipline feels like self-attack. You try to dominate weakness. After integration, discipline feels like alignment. You understand the fear. You acknowledge the resistance. And you build structure around it. For example, if part of you fears visibility, you don't mock it. You design gradual exposure. If you fear failure, you don't shame it. You lower the emotional stakes and increase repetition. If part of you resents control, you don't suppress it. You design autonomy within structure. Integration doesn't eliminate resistance. It reduces sabotage. Because the shadow no longer needs to fight from underground. It has been acknowledged. Here's the part that elevates everything. When you integrate your shadow, your confidence changes. It stops being so fragile. Because fragile confidence depends on pretending. Integrated confidence comes from knowing I am capable of weakness, and I choose strength anyway. That's stable. When you know you are capable of arrogance, you don't fear becoming arrogant. When you know you are capable of laziness, you don't panic when you feel resistance. When you know you are capable of fear, you don't collapse when it shows up. Because nothing about you is shocking anymore. Shock creates instability. Awareness creates control. Most people try to reprogram behavior without reprogramming self-perception. They try to act disciplined while secretly believing they're inconsistent. They try to act confident while secretly believing they're inadequate. They try to act ambitious while secretly believing they should stay small. Integration rewrites the internal contradiction. You stop saying, I shouldn't be this way. You start saying, this is part of me. Now I direct it. And direction is power. The shadow only dominates when it's denied. Once it's acknowledged, it becomes raw material. And raw material can be shaped. This is where result 7 becomes different. We're not trying to eliminate flaws. We are refining them. We're not pretending to be perfect. We're becoming integrated. Because the most dangerous person in the room is not the most disciplined. It's the most integrated. They know their darkness. They know their weakness. They know their fear. And none of it surprises them. Now that's psychological stability. And stability compounds. All right, now we close this properly. Because understanding the shadow changes responsibility. And responsibility changes everything. The responsibility of awareness. You can't unsee this now. Now you know. You know your shadow exists. You know it influences your habits. You know it distorts your discipline. You know it leaks into your reactions. And you know it sabotages what you say you want. And here's the part most people don't talk about. Awareness creates responsibility. Before this, you could say, I just don't know why I do that. Now you do. Before this, you could blame motivation, or circumstances, or stress, or even other people. Now you can't. Because now you understand the resistance isn't random. The procrastination isn't random. The inconsistency isn't random. It's patterned. And patterns can be interrupted. This is where most people fall back to sleep. They feel exposed. They feel uncomfortable. They feel called out. And instead of integrating, they distract, scroll, consume, rationalize, forget. Because awareness without action is heavier than ignorance. But this is where your edge begins. Because now, when you hesitate, you'll recognize it. When you overreact, you'll recognize it. When you judge someone harshly, you'll recognize it. When you avoid the hard thing, you'll recognize it. And that split-second recognition, that's power. That is the gap between impulse and identity. Most people live inside their impulses. Integrated people step outside them. You are not your anger. You are not your fear. You are not your laziness. You are not your insecurity. You are the one who sees it. And what you can see, you can direct. But here's the warning, and it matters. Integration is not a one-time event. It's ongoing. Your shadow evolves as you grow. Success brings new insecurities. Power brings new temptations. Visibility brings new fears. If you don't keep observing yourself, you will unconsciously build what you just dismantled. This is the real discipline. Not waking up early. Not tracking macros. Not grinding longer. The real discipline is self-observation without self-deception. It's catching yourself mid-pattern, mid-excuse, mid-projection, mid-avoidance. and saying, not this time. That's integration in motion. Most people want control over outcomes. Few people build control over reactions. But reactions create outcomes. If you control your reactions, you control the direction of your life. This is not about becoming perfect. It's about becoming conscious. And once consciousness expands, you cannot shrink back comfortably. So here's your responsibility. The next time you feel resistance, don't ask, how do I force myself? Ask, what part of me is resisting and why? The next time you feel jealous, don't suppress it, decode it. The next time you feel anger, don't explode, investigate. The next time you feel fear, don't retreat, assess. Because the shadow only controls what you refuse to examine. And from this point forward, refusal becomes a choice. That's the weight of awareness. Now let this land. You don't become powerful by eliminating darkness. You become powerful by integrating it. You don't become disciplined by hating weakness. You become disciplined by understanding it. You don't become confident by pretending to have no fear. You become confident by knowing you do and acting anyway. This is the work. Not flashy, not viral, not instant, but permanent. And permanent change is built in the parts of you no one else sees. So when you leave this video, don't look for motivation. Look for observation. Look for the next moment your shadow tries to run the program and interrupt it. Because once you see the pattern, you have a choice. And choice is power. You're not here to eliminate your darkness. You're here to master it. Most people run from what they hide. We refine it. Most people deny what they fear. We integrate it. Most people stay fragmented. We build wholeness. This isn't about becoming someone new. It's about becoming someone integrated. And integrated people don't collapse under pressure. They compound. Results aren't built by perfection. They're built by alignment. And alignment begins in the shadow. You've seen the pattern. Break it or be ruled by it. This is results.